the American Civil War in 1862, Newton Knight was a battlefield nurse who, a few years later toward the end of the war, decided to rise up with the local people against their own state. They wanted to end this damned war on their own terms before the Union claimed victory. But going up against the government came with severe consequences.
Lights, camera, action.
Recap camp.
Newton was a war nurse on the front lines of the Confederate Army. During one of the battles, the Confederacy suffers a brutal defeat, and Newton rushes to get the wounded back behind the lines. That night, while in the forest, Newton hears a noise. At first, he thinks it's an enemy soldier, but it turns out to be Daniel, his nephew. Due to a shortage of soldiers, they had forced Daniel into service. The next day in the war, they sprint toward a safer trench, but just then, another group of their own soldiers arrives. The commander orders Daniel and Newton to provide cover fire during the retreat. Daniel listens, raises his head to shoot, and in that moment, a sniper's bullet hits him in the stomach. Daniel collapses. Newton sees the bullet wound and knows he must get Daniel to the rear immediately so a doctor can try to save him. But the hospital is overflowing with officers and sergeants. Newton can't do anything more. He carries Daniel under a tree and Daniel dies. Newton decides to take Daniel's body back to his sister. His friends warn him that doing so will be seen as desertion and he'll be executed. But Newton is resolute and sets off. After several days, he makes it home. His sister sees her son's body. A few hours later, they hold a small ceremony and bury Daniel. During the funeral, Newton notices some cavalrymen approaching. They are tax collectors, seizing property to support the war effort. They approach a woman and her child and proceed to loot everything in her home. Newton and the others gather inside his house. Newton gives them a horn and asks them to blow it the next time the agents show up so he can come help. That night, Newton's son has a terrible fever. Newton calls for a doctor, and the only one available at the moment is a black woman who is an enslaved person. She works to reduce the boy's fever, and by morning, the fever is completely gone. Grateful, Newton gives her a small piece of gold as thanks. Then Newton hears the horn. Tax agents are returning in an hour to take everything. Newton comes up with a plan. When the tax agents arrive, their leader sees the armed family and laughs. Newton tells him others are up on the hill too. The agent sees the barrels of rifles aimed at him and freezes. But it's just a bluff. The tax collectors are forced to retreat. But a few hours later, local law enforcement arrives with dogs to arrest Newton. He escapes from the house, but the dogs track him down, and one of them bites his leg and injures him. Newton barely escapes and goes to a friend for help. She orders her servant George to lead Newton to the swamp. George escorts him part of the way and tells him to wait there. Someone else will come. Near nightfall, Rachel, the same woman who saved his son, arrives to take him the rest of the way. She leads him to a group of escaped black slaves. One of them is named Moses. His former master had horribly abused him. Moses applies herbal medicine to Newton's wound. Newton has a solution to remove the iron from Moses's neck. The next morning, George brings them some guns. Newton teaches everyone how to shoot. Then Newton starts cutting the iron collar from Moses's neck. The sound rings out. Not long after, they hear the barking of dogs. Everyone takes cover. As the officers approach, Newton and his group open fire and quickly take them all down. As the days pass, more people arrive and join them. As their numbers grow, they decide it's time to teach the tax agents a serious lesson. They lie in ambush in the forest and block the road. The tax agents quickly realize they're surrounded and have no options left. The incident is immediately reported to the colonel. Believing the group to be only 5 or 6 men, he doesn't take it seriously. The next day, a major theft occurred from one of the farms that belonged to the government. The colonel personally investigates the situation, realizing this is more than simple theft. His men find a barn full of stolen corn and begin transporting it by wagon. But on the way, they're ambushed and got surrounded by the very people rebelling against the government. Newton has become their leader. The agents are forced to flee empty-handed. When the colonel learns that Newton's group now numbers nearly 200, he finally sees them as a serious threat. The rebels celebrate their victory. However, Colonel orders every house that owned by men associated with Newton's group to be burned. He also distributes flyers saying that anyone who surrenders will be safe and their families will not be harmed. Some group members, concerned about losing their homes, begin to consider surrender. The colonel continues destroying homes until a few finally give in. He had expected many more to surrender, but when only 5 show up, he orders their execution. News of the execution spreads quickly, and the group becomes more determined than ever to defend themselves and seek revenge. The families of the executed men hold a funeral. The colonel and his men attend, expecting Newton and his group to appear. But nothing happens, and the colonel grows disappointed. Suddenly, the attack begins. Newton's men burst out from inside the coffins and open fire. Newton and a few others had been hiding under a wagon and now join the attack. The colonel's men are completely surrounded and most of them are killed. The colonel himself is wounded and flees into a church, but Newton follows and finds him. With nowhere left to run, Newton removes his belt and sends the colonel straight to hell. After this battle, the group takes control of the town, and they arrest the remaining soldiers. News arrives, the war is over. The South has been defeated. No one is happier than the black community because they are now free. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, you know what to do.